Our last representative, I'd like to turn the floor to Amy Farah Weiss, who is running for mayor of San Francisco.
Hello everyone, I'm Amy Farah Weiss, and I was born in Berkeley, raised in San Jose, lived in a few different places around the Bay Area before moving to San Francisco in 2007. And I actually took a job working at a place called Act Now, and it was a sustainability strategist position. And when I found out who we were going to go, I looked at the Craigslist ad and it said, do you want to travel around the country and talk to businesses and workers about sustainability? And I thought that would be wonderful. I have a background in education and research and strategy. And so I signed up for the interview, and then they said the group that I would be going around the country talking to would be Wal-Mart executives and Wal-Mart employees. And at first I was a little reluctant about being in the belly of that beast, but then I thought, this is such an amazing opportunity to actually find the alignment between what's good for business and what's good for the planet and what's good for people. And so that just shows you a little bit about my approach in terms of trying to work together in service to the greater good. And my mom is actually a Republican who watches Fox News and votes for Bushes, and my dad is a Democrat who loves the Clinton dynasty. But what's so really interesting here is that I think in a Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump matchup, I think both of my parents might actually vote for Sanders. I'm kind of curious to just do an impromptu poll here. If it was Sanders versus Trump, who would vote for Trump in the room? Yeah, and would anybody vote for Sanders out of that choice? Is there any? No, okay. Just kind of curious about that. But you know, we were talking before about this concept of what does it matter if people can't live in San Francisco. And it's just really important that the people who help the city function and to add to its culture are also able to live amongst us. And so we have to figure out a way to support workforce development. And a lot of these jobs that have been brought to the city, there's been about 100,000 jobs, according to the Chronicle, since 2010. And as we all know, the issue in the 2011's mayor's race was we need more jobs, right? But what ended up happening was that, and I'd really like to see a report on this. You won't see Ed Lee do a report on this. But how many of those jobs went to people who were living in San Francisco before the recession hit? And what was really the cause of the recession? You know, I think we have to say that Glass-Steagall, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, contributed to that. So it's important for us to see how the global financial collapse actually contributed to our housing crisis. Because Lennar, right? You're covering your head over there. You think I'm crazy. But Lennar actually was supposed to build, what, 10,000 units starting in 2008, right? And what ended up happening was they said that they had the financing all set up when they signed the contract. Ed Lee, the redevelopment agency, all these groups that were working together, they didn't put any time constrictions or limits on what Lennar had to accomplish. And then it turns out that the collapse made it so that they didn't have the funding to be able to move forward. So then we had to go internationally to get investment in order to build here. And I think that we can actually be doing better to create opportunities with the tremendous wealth that's in San Francisco to be developing with our own funds. And that could come from unions, that could come from new technology. There's this site called fundrise.com. The jobs bill of a couple years ago allowed for people to, in a way, crowdfund in order to invest in development and properties. So there are these opportunities that are available to us there. So I think there just needs to be this assessment of how do we address the issues that are happening in our society right now in an equitable way. And you know, when it comes to Prop F and this idea of, you know, rent control and how that actually affects things, I listen to people. That's what I do. And I do surveys and I hear open-ended responses. And so when I was hearing people talk about Proposition F, one of the issues was people who live in homes don't want to get stuck with someone if they rent out to them. And so if they don't do Airbnb, they might leave that room empty in their house, even though it could bring in a little bit extra. And so when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking maybe there's room for another type of more midterm lease, and the city could actually support doctors, first responders, teachers who are in need of housing. What if there was a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, or 12-month renewable lease if you live in your own property and you could actually have people come in and you could test them out, say, or you could renew again and again if you wanted to, but we can actually create solutions that address these problems.
So in other words, get rid of rent control.
I'm not saying get rid of rent control, but one of the things about the free market that I'd like to ask about is, was the free market working when property owners on Market Street decided to keep their units empty? Is the free market working when you don't rent out at what the market will allow?
The free
Is
market
it?
is, rent control stops the free market, and that's the problem. And yes, that is the free market working.
So keeping areas blighted and having an economic negative impact.
What would you do if you had a 2-unit building and you decide you're going to...
I'm talking about business properties along Market Street. So the idea, yeah, why did they keep those empty for so long and keep it blighted? No, I'm not talking about rent control with that. I'm talking about the free market. So along Market Street, you had a lot of vacant business properties because the owners didn't want to rent them out at what the market would bear. Is that the free market working?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Really? Even though it negatively impacts? Yeah. But aren't you somewhat responsible to the community that you impact in our world?
Responsible for renting out your second bedroom?
Let's take it one question at a time. How do you answer?
Your house is...
No, you actually, you aren't responsible, but maybe there's ways that we could help support that. But this is a lively discussion. Thank you very much. I really do like to talk about these issues. And you can check out thinktwicevotewise.com.
I appreciate your actually thinking about things.
Thank you.
Even though we may disagree with, how to get there. There's two propositions. There's Prop J, which is called the Legacy Businesses Measure. That could provide up to $50,000 for any business, however large or small, that's over 30 years old, that's put on the registry.
Right.
Do you think that that's a proper use of the general fund when it's coming out of discretionary funds and you have other programs that are not set-asides that would be taken from? And that's number one. Number two is there was the Stewart and Kennedy Act. Stewart was in the Congress. He was a Republican from Connecticut. He died of AIDS, I think in '88. And his act was that if you have base closures, now that's in San Francisco, that's the Presidio, Hunters Point, and Yerba Buena and Treasure Island. But the first priority of housing would go to the homeless. Now, I know that there's been no homeless housing in Hunters Point. They have temporary homeless housing at TI, but they're all going to be gone, when they develop the property. And then Presidio, you have 3 buildings that are swords and plowshares, but it's like 100 homeless vets. Would that be a better use than Prop K, which would say that any surplus public lands, the first priority goes to homeless housing?
Well, I think it goes to affordable housing, is what Prop K says.
Have you actually read it?
I actually haven't read the entirety of Prop K, but I should.
Read it.
But you said it goes to homeless first,
The first
to housing,
goes to homeless.
to creating housing for homeless, but permanent housing.
That's right.
Okay.
And so the thing is that if there's 4,000, they said the unmet need for homeless in the city is 6,000 units.
Right, right.
So if the city only has room for 4,000 units, all this pie in the sky that they're talking about that they're going to do for low, moderate, or middle income housing will never get built. It will only be homeless housing. So in people's neighborhoods.
Well, let me just say, I don't think I have much time, but I do have a plan. Ed Lee has made it a real issue right now around the homeless being pushed out for the Super Bowl party. And I actually have a really cost-effective plan that could work to house many people. There's an index that was made by an urban planner that is a Berkeley professor, where it's an index on all of the underutilized alleyways and city-owned properties. And I'm thinking, why doesn't the NFL you know, like we all love a good prize, do an innovation prize fund, give us $5 million. If I could be the project manager for that project, you would see that 3,000 people could get housed with $5 million in interim housing. Yeah, but also, you know, I worked on such a small budget. I've lived on, you will not believe this, but I have been living on an average of $15,000 a year in San Francisco for the last 5 years because I've chosen to live my values and not get paid for the activism and neighborhood development work that I do. But I reactivated a community garden and did programming for 2 years on less than $10,000. I know how to stretch a budget, working with people and actually activating our imaginations about what's possible. And that's why I say let's be YIMBYs and say what we say yes to, yes in my backyard, rather than just pushing back against what we don't want to see.
Okay.
Thank you.